The 2008 BBC series Merlin features young Merlin at Camelot, run by King Uther, who's outlawed magic. Wizards get executed. Merlin lives with his uncle Gaius, who knows about Merlin's powers, and Merlin becomes Prince Arthur's servant. He meets Guinevere, servant to the king's ward Morgana. The series is to King Arthur what Smallville was to Superman, for better or worse. The series was never great, but it has some charming episodes, especially in the early seasons. As it progresses, since I like The Matter of Britain, and I've done these fix videos for other things, it seemed natural this series would land on my hit list. Romantic angst plays a big role in the series, and the showrunners clearly wanted to satisfy all potential fan bases, even if they couldn't follow through on all pairings. Don't do that. If there is even a 1% chance Morgana is secretly Arthur's sister, don't tease a romantic pairing between these two in this family show. Start with Arthur and Guinevere secretly a thing, hiding their relationship because a prince and a servant girl is not done. Merlin and Morgana should have had more of a connection. Morgana doesn't know about Merlin's powers, but they both got magic even if she doesn't know that, so there should be a bond they don't understand. This can be explored later after Morgana falls to the dark side, with Merlin angsting it up to try to save her. Speaking of the dark side, fully commit to Uther as a bad guy. Uther wants a 10-year-old boy executed because he's a magic user, but an episode later, when he crowns Arthur Prince of the Kingdom, which I thought he already was, being the son of the king, he asks if Arthur will demonstrate mercy. Uther never once demonstrates mercy. When Merlin is sick, Uther wants him to die because Arthur disobeyed him, and the only reason Merlin was sick was because he saved Arthur's life. Morgana should have been against him from day one. He's responsible for her alleged father's death, and she sees him executing magic users, especially troubling once she understands she has magic. Merlin saw an innocent man executed seconds after he came to Camelot. That could happen to him if he's not careful. Gaius remembers the evils Uther abolished, even if he went overboard, and some innocents got caught in the crossfire. Arthur sides with his father most of the time while trying to temper his father's tyranny. The big villain of season 1 was Nimue. This version of Nimue could frankly be any evil sorceress. Acrasia, Alcinia, Annaware, she's basically just evil lady. I mentioned in my fix on the Guy Ritchie King Arthur movie that there are two ladies of the lake in Arthuriana, Vivian and Nimue. Some people like to conflate the two, but I like the idea that the Lady of the Lake is a title, and each lady might have their own agenda, as Vivian wanted Sir Balin dead for personal reasons that had nothing to do with her duties as the Lady of the Lake. We'll cast our season 1 baddie as Vivian, and spoilers ahoy, save Nimue for later on. The show's Nimue only appears in 4 out of 13 episodes. She needs to be more present in this season. She can be Merlin's shoulder devil, playing on his need to not hide his abilities, which he must do while Uther lives. When Merlin sees her for the threat she is, he sees Uther has some valid reason to want magic extinguished. This season plays with this a little, but it's too little too late. I can barely tell you anything about this character who is supposed to be a major threat. Say Uther killed Vivian's brother after Vivian facilitated Arthur's birth, and she wants revenge, even though other representatives of the old ways are saying, let it go, his son is supposed to be a big deal, you don't want to mess with the timeline by killing Uther too early and putting Arthur down the wrong path. Merlin keeps going to this dragon chained under the castle, asking for advice. The dragon tells him what he doesn't want to hear, Merlin ignores him and does something else to save the day. In the season finale, Arthur is fatally wounded. Dragon tells Merlin to go to one of the people of the old religion to get a cure for Arthur, but there will be a price. It's Nimue. Merlin wants to give his life for Arthur. Instead, Merlin's mom gets sick, and the dragon knew this would happen but didn't care. He wants freedom for himself and for magic users to flourish, and they'll be able to do that once Arthur becomes king, so he says. Merlin's mom should have died. Every major character has dead parent issues. Arthur's mom, Morgana's dad, Gwen's dad. Merlin's mom dying would have brought him closer with these characters and taught him a lesson about trusting the dragon. There is no reason the dragon needs to keep holding Merlin's hand after this. Merlin immediately patches things up with the dragon in season 2, which leads to the dragon asking Merlin to release him later so he can rain fire on Camelot. The same dragon who talked about how important Arthur was tries to kill Arthur because he's mad at Uther. This same dragon is still Merlin's buddy in the series finale. The dragon should have been an antagonist the whole time. Cutting Merlin's connection with the dragon forces Merlin to grow up and handle his problems by himself. It does mean we abandon the Dragon Lord subplot. Merlin was touted as being the most powerful magic user Gaius had seen, and that's saying something. Did Merlin really need a power boost? Season 2, the dragon begins training Morgana, who already disdains Uther, making Morgana's fall to the dark side feel more natural. In the show, one moment she's risking her life for her servant. The next, she's joined a dude who says he will kill everyone on Team Uther, including Morgana's servant. This show should have been more like Smallville. Lex's distrust of Clark didn't come out of nowhere, and the show earned his character turn. The dragon manipulating Morgana would remedy that. He tells Morgana about Merlin's magic, which breaks her trust in Merlin. The dragon still wants Merlin to guide Arthur to his destiny, so he doesn't want to tell Morgana about this unless he he has to, but her friendship with Merlin is getting in the way of the dragon manipulating her, so he tells her at the end of season 2. But Morgana sees through him. He tries to assure her they're friends, but she kills him. Mordred is a druid we meet in season 1. Season 2 set up his villainy in a fantastic episode where Morgana's powers are out of control. Merlin tells her to go to the druids. Uther thinks she's been kidnapped. He sends soldiers to massacre the druids. Mordred has a very good reason to hate Uther and Merlin. Season 5 ignored this, setting up a new reason for him to turn evil. I would stick with Mordred's righteous anger in season 2. The dragon wants Morgana to explore her powers with the druids, but he's playing a risky game where he hopes this will fuel her hatred of Uther once he moves heaven and heck to get her back. There's an episode with these fairies trying to enter their kingdom they've been banished from. I would have Mordred forge an alliance with the fairy folk. He makes a bargain with them to train him so he can destroy Camelot. Like the dragon, they want magic to flourish in the land, and if Mordred kills Uther, that can happen. Pull a John Borman's Excalibur and say while he's in this Fade dimension, time passes differently, so you can recast whenever you're ready to bring him back. Morgause is Morgana's secret half-sister and comes in sporadically to stir stuff up. Since I've already got the dragon turning Morgana to the dark side, we don't need Morgause. She's only in 2 episodes of season 2, and by the end of that season, Morgana is firmly on the path to evil, but Morgause didn't have enough of a connection with Morgana in that progression. But the dragon's been here since episode 1, so his connection would be easier to establish. If an alien who's never heard of King Arthur watched this series, when he gets to the season 2 episode Lancelot and Guinevere, he would ask, where did this relationship come from? Lancelot appears once in season 1. Guinevere makes him a costume, and that's it. In season 2, they start their lovey-dovey crap. He says he never stopped thinking about her. She says she didn't know she could feel this way. The only reason this is here is because the audience has heard of the Arthur, Guinevere, Lancelot triangle, so the show has to do it. It comes out of nowhere, it has no build-up, and worse, because Lancelot only shows up once a season, the show never gets to play with this relationship. It's here to deflate the Arthur-Guinevere thing that wasn't that present before now. I would have Lancelot be a character in nearly every episode. When Uther nearly finds out about Arthur and Guinevere's relationship, Arthur breaks it off, because Uther might banish Guinevere for being so presumptuous if he found out. She finds comfort in the arms of Lancelot. They accidentally fall for each other. Lancelot feels guilty because he's Arthur's friend. You would have to ditch Lancelot being a peasant who wants to be a knight, which I'm fine with. It might get tricky balancing another character in the cast, so he's doing quests for the king. He's not in every episode, but he has to be in more than one episode a season if you want this relationship to feel real. At the end of season 2, Merlin poisons Morgana to save Camelot. Morgause takes Morgana far away for a year, with only Merlin and Gaius the wiser on why she disappeared. Morgana returns at the beginning of season 3, and she's all, "Oh, father, I missed you," but she's secretly scheming. This was where I lost what little interest in the series I had. In my version, season 3 is where everything hits the fan. Morgana kills the dragon. She has no reason to secretly plot against Uther and the rest of the kingdom. Morgana tries to reason with Merlin. "You have magic. Why aren't we working together? Uther's been killing our kind since before we were born. We can make things better for other magic users." She believes Uther's a threat, and the series isn't showing us she's wrong. Where she's wrong is how far she's willing to go. Merlin tells her if they openly fight Uther, that'll make things worse for the kingdom. What if Uther dies thanks to magic, and Arthur becomes opposed to magic, like Uther was, which is what happened in the show. Merlin agrees Uther is an enemy to their people, but open war won't help. Morgana doesn't have beef with Arthur, but if Merlin's right and fighting Uther places Arthur as her enemy, she will eliminate him. By now, she's figured out she's Uther's daughter, and if both of the enemies of magic folk are out of the way, she can take the throne and usher in a golden age for her people. This gives us antagonists with different motivations, but they're still antagonistic. Vivian and Mordred are fueled by revenge, but Vivian just wants to hurt Uther, while Mordred wants all of Camelot to burn. The dragon wants Uther gone, but not for revenge. Morgana wants to help the realm, but doesn't agree with the dragon's specific definitions of what would help the realm. Characters who want different things can provide more interesting stories than when everyone is just evil. You've got a feast at Camelot. Morgana publicly attacks Uther. Merlin tries to stop her, saves Uther's life, but he's seriously wounded, in a coma for the rest of the season. Everybody knows Merlin's secret. Arthur is furious. This guy he thought was his friend has been keeping this huge secret all this time. His dad's got one foot in the grave, so he's not thinking clearly, but he screams he never wants to see Merlin again. With Merlin now in exile, what's to stop Morgana from coming back? Lancelot and his sister, that's who. In some Arthuriana, Lancelot's stepmom is Vivian, the Lady of the Lake. Since we've already killed her off in season 1, we'll say Lancelot's foster sister, Nimue, is in line to become the next Lady of the Lake. Since none of the Arthurian stories I'm aware of get into the lady's duties, let's get into that. The lady is supposed to be an ambassador between the Muggles and the Wizards. Vivian screwed up when Uther asked her to help his wife conceive a child. Sure, the king needs an heir, otherwise civil war when there's no apparent rightful king. But Vivian got Uther's wife killed, and that sparked off the massacre of many magical beings, which earned Vivian's ire. Then Merlin gets Vivian not deaded, and yeah, she was a menace, but now we don't have a Lady of the Lake. Oops. Normally, it's the lady's job to choose and train her successor. successor, but since Vivian thought she had decades before she needed to worry about that, the exiled magic folk choose someone to take her office, and Lancelot's foster sister was chosen. She's untrained and not ready to take on her duties. With Merlin no longer able to protect Uther and Arthur, Lancelot and his sister will keep an eye on things. Lancelot arranges a meeting between Merlin and Nimue. They agree Nimue will secretly protect Camelot. Merlin will be politicking with the other magic folk who have been living in exile. There's a lot of opinionated magic folk who are thinking maybe Morgana is onto something. If we knock out the royal family, we can live free and happy. Merlin tries to calm everyone down, forming alliances with more level-headed sorcerers. Maybe some are aware of what the dragon used to say. Arthur is supposed to usher in a golden age for them and the Muggles. But Merlin's not the only one trying to sway public opinion. Mordred's back from magic boot camp in Fairyland, trying to rile everyone up against the royal family. There's a lot of magic people in exile, so Merlin doesn't know what Mordred is up to. The new status quo would last at least half the season, maybe longer. You could shake up the dramatic shakeup halfway into your new direction. Merlin finds out something bad is going down. He goes back to Camelot in disguise. I wasn't the biggest fan of LOL Merlin's an old man, but you could do a mythology gag here, and it lets you return Merlin to doing his thing before going back to wheeling and dealing with the exiled magic folk. While Merlin is out of town, Gaius stays behind. Many think he's also a sorcerer, or at least should face some punishment for housing one, but Gaius is keeping Uther alive, and Arthur knows that. Gaius will tell Arthur, your dad thought he had good reasons for his stance on magic, but Merlin saved your life many times and could not have done so without magic. Guinevere mentions that time they teamed up to save that creepy druid boy, even though he came from a community of probably wizards. Arthur disobeyed the law of the land to save him, like Merlin did every day. Speaking of Guinevere, this political tumult will pull her away from Lancelot. Lancelot is working to protect the kingdom, running secret messages between Nimue and Merlin, as she is a little more familiar with the figures Merlin needs to convince to be on his side. And Guinevere sees what Arthur needs right now is a friend. Gaius means well, but he's making appeals of logic, and that's not Arthur's strong suit. Guinevere will be by Arthur's side, accidentally rekindling the romance they once had. We eventually have some plan from Morgana to get Arthur and Uther out of the way, again. Morgana is extreme but not cartoonishly evil, which is where the series took her. Even when she's trying to kill the guy she grew up with, was probably her best friend, I don't want this to be an easy thing for her. They're standing in the way of what's best for her people. She will do something that requires Merlin risking his life to save Arthur. Despite Arthur's anger from before, Arthur will see Gaius and Guinevere were right. Merlin is a friend, though it'll take a while for their trust wall to be rebuilt. Following another failure, Morgana flees, thinking, next time, Gadget. But maybe not. Seeing that Merlin was apparently right, Arthur is open to peace with the magic folk, Morgana will question her methods. Same for a lot of the people Merlin's been rubbing elbows with. They see Merlin was willing to put his money where his mouth was to get the humans and the wizards to be friends. So with Arthur ready to put aside his father's grudges against the magical community, many of them will be willing to see how friendliness with Camelot will go. Season 4, Arthur is the de facto leader. He and Guinevere can be together without fear of persecution. Things are looking up for everyone, except poor Lancelot. Merlin and Nimue might make a cute couple, growing closer as Merlin helps her ease into her role as the Lady of the Lake. While a lot of the human sorcerers are tentatively on good terms with Camelot, the Fae from that alternate dimension Mordred is allied with don't think things are happening fast enough, and Arthur needs to be under their control. They send a Guinevere lookalike to whisper in his ear and guide Camelot in a direction to their liking. While Arthur doesn't know his wife's been replaced, give him a break, he's got a lot on his plate, Lancelot would notice and rescues Guinevere and foils this whole ploy. This kind of pushes Guinevere back into Lancelot's arms. Arthur will face opposition from Urien and Lot, father of Gawain. The series we got introduced Gawain in Season 3, but his familial backstory bears no similarities to the Gawain of the legends. I would introduce him here, loyal to his father when we first meet him, but swayed by Arthur's good-naturedness and eventually switches sides to Team Camelot. Morgana has thrown in with Urien for political asylum. Urien is keen to have an alliance with a sorceress who can back his schemes, and since they join forces, he's been pushing for Morgana to marry him. If they succeed in killing Arthur, a marriage with Uther's daughter strengthens his hold on the throne. But Morgana is second-guessing her ambitions, as she sees things might work out for her people with Arthur as king. She resists marriage and is resisting helping him with some of his attempts at taking out Arthur, but is sticking around for political asylum. Arthur has some big ideas about how he wants to make things better for his kingdom, and not just keep the status quo. He wants knights who will champion the cause of justice he's always been interested in, but hasn't always been able to practice under his father's tyranny. Essentially, the early days of the Round Table. Percival was introduced in the last episode of Season 3, so it wouldn't be difficult to move him up to this season. Once Gawain realizes he's on the wrong side, he would be part of this initiative as well. You would need a few other names. Bedivere, Tristan, they wouldn't have to take up a lot of screen time, just enough to get across the idea that Arthur wants to make some changes across the kingdom. The knights were often presented more as local police officers, arresting someone Uther suspected of being a sorcerer, but think of them now as emergency relief with swords. Lot and Urien are the main bad guys for this season, but they're just here to keep Arthur busy while Merlin goes through a bit of a crisis of his own. Nimue has been getting visions of the future, much like how the dragon could see the future. And what Nimue saw is that Arthur is going to die very soon. Merlin refuses to accept this. With how often the dragon talked about how Arthur is going to bring the realm into a golden age, how can he do that if he's dead? Nimue doesn't like it either, but each vision shows her Arthur's death in a great battle. Merlin will try to avert Arthur's death, will have several near misses on Arthur's life, and each time he thinks he's changed the future, but Nimue sees no change in her visions. By the end of the season, Nimue will have given up telling Merlin it's a lost cause, and Merlin thinks everything is okay. Near the end of the season, with the failure of the foe Guinevere, Mordred saves Arthur from one of Urien's assassination attempts, ingratiating himself to Arthur. Nobody recognizes him. The last time they saw him, he was a little kid. Mordred tries to help Urien a few times, but realized that was going nowhere, and thought it best to take down Arthur and his friends from within. Season 5, Mordred administers magic healing on Uther, which Mordred hopes should set all this progress Arthur is bringing about to a grinding halt. Even though I see Uther as a villain, there is room for redemption. He sees now how well Arthur has done, and reconsiders all the years he wasted when he could have done so much more for the kingdom. Even though Uther had a good reason to distrust sorcery after what Vivian did to his wife, Merlin saved his life, so he can't hold on to that rage anymore. Arthur would be ready to let Uther take his rightful spot on the throne, but Uther suggests Arthur stay where he is, and Uther can help out, give advice, but he has no reason to undo all of this, much to Mordred's chagrin. Word of Uther's recovery reaches Morgana, now homeless after Urien's defeat in the previous season. Morgana is ready to seek atonement, even though nobody will believe her. She returns to Camelot in disguise to seek forgiveness from the man who, though he had a lot of faults, was a father to her. Despite the many horrible things he did in his reign, he was complicated. She sees a lot of herself in him and hopes if there's room for him to be redeemed, maybe there's room for her as well. Uther accepts Morgana's apology and assures her he can convince Arthur to pardon her for everything that's happened, but Morgana says no, I cannot be given the easy way out for everything I've done. Merlin will be suspicious of Uther's sudden recovery because he smells fey magic, and he suspects someone resurrected him for a reason. Merlin or Nimue will realize this recovery comes at a price. Uther's back to his old health, but for an abbreviated time. Mordred just wanted him up and running long enough to wreck Arthur's reign. When they break this news to Uther, he connects them with a mystery sorceress he believes can help them. If somebody is using dark magic in Camelot, Arthur's life might be in danger, and Uther wants them to focus on that instead of saving him. Uther sees what Arthur cannot or will not see, that Guinevere and Lancelot are secretly an item. He tells Arthur in private, and while this devastates Arthur, he decides to keep it a secret. He's all about justice for all, and that means if the queen and one of his knights are committing treason, they would have to be punished just like if anybody else broke the law. And if everyone found out about this, it might ruin everything he's worked so hard to build. Uther doesn't like it, but respects Arthur's decision. Mordred will be listening in magically on this conversation, probably has been listening in since he came to Camelot, so now he has the weapon to tear all this down he's been looking for. Mordred knows Merlin is investigating him. During a feast, Mordred summons some dark energy that makes its way toward Arthur. He hopes Merlin will take a bullet to save his king, and that leaves the kingdom unprotected from Arthur's pet wizard. But Uther takes a bullet. It's a big boo-hoo. Mordred's immediate plan is thwarted, but he realizes Merlin's magic can only go so far. He starts a rumor among some of the knights. They catch Lancelot and Guinevere in each other's arms. This is a family show. Guinevere tells Lancelot to escape. I don't think he's the kind of guy who would leave his lady to be executed while he's free. Lancelot flees, but promises he will be back for her. Mordred's like, that's rough, Arthur, but haven't you been preaching about how nobody is above the law? Arthur reluctantly has to sentence Guinevere to death, but he secretly goes to Merlin and Nimue to ask them to contact Lancelot with the time of the execution. But the damage is done. Arthur publicly pronouncing judgment kicks off a schism in the Round Table. Some of the knights have worked with Lancelot in the trenches. They trust him with their lives. Maybe they see Arthur as distant, not getting his hands dirty like they are. Of course, we've spent time with Arthur over 4 years by this point, but these newer knights haven't. Many of the knights leave the Round Table and join Lancelot in exile. It would be tricksy trying to pull this off, but I would want both sides to be likable in this conflict. Lancelot manages to rescue Guinevere. Surprisingly, nobody dies. But Mordred brings a report that he knows where Lancelot and his followers are hiding. Despite Arthur's efforts, Mordred publicly asks if they are going to bring war to the traitors. Reluctantly, Arthur says, yes, let's go. This is where Nimue becomes everyone's least favorite character. Merlin thinks he's averted her visions of Arthur's death, but she knows this is the day Arthur will lose his kingdom, and she cannot let Merlin interfere with that. Nimue takes Merlin into the forest, tells him there's something very important she needs to show him, and she traps him in a cave. She doesn't want to do this, but she sees this is what must happen. The dragon was ruthless in how he tried to preserve the timeline, but he knew what needed to happen, and now so does Nimue. In the show, the dragon juiced up a sword for Arthur, then it was hidden for most of the series. Morgana, from her link with the dragon, knows about the sword, and with Merlin missing in action, she gets the sword and gives it to Arthur because there's still a dark sorcerer who resurrected Uther still at large. Arthur might need a magic sword to protect himself. Mordred is going out into battle with Arthur's forces to make sure everything Arthur has built crumbles, and he's even willing to throw his own life away to see this through to the end. Lancelot tries to infiltrate Arthur's camp to barter for Guinevere's life. Take me, but let her live. live. He's known Arthur long enough, he knows he can appeal to his better nature. He even tells the Round Table Knights who have followed him into exile, "Don't worry, I'll be fine," but they're not so sure, so they're keeping an eye on the encamped army from a distance. It might have worked, but Mordred, he gets some guys riled up and says, "Look, the traitor is here to kill Arthur, let's kill him." Lancelot's boys see what's about to happen, they come in to the rescue. Uh-oh, it's a war nobody except Mordred wanted. This is Mordred's chance to take out Arthur. He takes Arthur by surprise, and since Excalibur is a magic sword, Mordred didn't see it in play, so Arthur is able to surprise kill Mordred while he monologues about why he did all this. Lancelot calls off his army, Arthur's followers pull back thinking they can save Arthur. Nimue arrives with the mystery sorceress who she's known for a while is Morgana. They believe they can save him. Before Arthur is taken away, he tells his knights to end this war and that he names Guinevere as his successor to the throne. Since he has no heir to take his place, this is their best option. Otherwise, an enemy lord like Urian will try to put himself forward as king. You might say this is hypocritical, since Guinevere gets to be High Queen after her alliance with Lancelot, but Arthur realizes law has to be tempered with mercy. Arthur was so caught up in trying to bring equality to everyone that he lost sight of that. Morgana and Nimue take Arthur away to recover until his people need him again. Merlin is released from prison. He stays at Camelot, protecting the realm from threats the Round Table cannot deal with. In the show, for reasons I do not understand, Merlin just took off. I don't see the same nonsense that had been happening for the past 5 seasons would suddenly stop happening. Lancelot will not stick around. His affair with Guinevere led to all of this, and he doesn't feel he should get a happy ending after causing this civil war. The dragon talks so much about how amazing things would get when Arthur became king, but we never got to see that. I get it, a utopia is a society where everything is perfect, aka no conflict, and you have to have conflict to have stories, so I see why we didn't get this. But if I can see why they didn't do it, maybe the people getting paid to write this series should have seen the problem as well, and not tease something they knew they wouldn't show. My solution is the dragon didn't mean the good times would happen in Arthur's life, but would happen as a result of Arthur. Arthur kicks things off, and as he leaves Guinevere in charge, she will be the one who sees this golden age through. If you're a fan of the show, you probably didn't like what I did, but as someone who's a fan of the old school myths, I pretty much adapted those myths to make what I feel is a better story. I saw a lot of people saying they wanted a happy ending, which I'm not sure why you thought you would get that. Even with all the liberties this show took with the source material, pretty much all Arthurian stories end on a downer. Even doing the expected ending, this one is a lot happier than what I'd probably go for if I had my druthers. But going a little bit sweeter on the bittersweet scale, I think it works this time. If you didn't like it, that's fine, but I hope you did. I do these fix videos all the time, so check those out. I'll be back in the future with something else. Until then, have a good one.